Right now in Japan, something is happening that until recently seemed like science fiction, but is gradually becoming part of everyday life. It is not just about robots in factories or automated production lines, but about a full-scale robotic transformation of society. In everyday environments, incredibly realistic humanoid machines are beginning to appear, and by their appearance, movements, and manner of communication, they are becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish from humans. While previously such developments existed mainly as demonstrations and experimental prototypes, they are now starting to move into the real economy, where their task is no longer to impress, but to work. What especially defines the current moment is the speed of change. Just a few years ago, a humanoid robot capable of holding a conversation and performing tasks in a public setting seemed rare. Today, such systems are being tested in cafes, stores, hotels, and service environments. They greet visitors, take orders, assist with navigation, and even engage in basic conversation. At the same time, their appearance and behavior are becoming so refined that in some situations it is genuinely difficult for a person to immediately realize that they are not interacting with another human. This is no longer just a technological experiment, but the beginning of a new model of interaction. Because for the first time in a long while, machines are not just executing commands, but becoming part of the social environment. They are not standing apart, but are literally integrating into everyday processes that were previously handled only by humans. And this is exactly what creates the feeling that we are witnessing not just technological progress, but a full-scale robotic revolution. The reason for this rapid acceleration lies in a fundamental challenge that Japan is facing. The country's population is aging rapidly, and this is not abstract statistics, but a real factor already affecting the economy. The number of working-age people is declining, while demand for services remains high, creating a gap that cannot be filled by traditional methods. This is where robots become not just an alternative, but the only scalable solution. The government and major corporations understand this very well, which is why enormous resources are being invested in robotics, not only in hardware but also in software. Because today, the key task is not just to create a mechanism, but to create a system that can interact with humans as naturally as possible. That is why so much attention is paid to details, such as facial expressions, smoothness of movement, tone of voice, and even pauses in speech. Modern humanoid robots are already capable of imitating breathing, blinking, and subtle emotional reactions. These small details may seem insignificant, but they are exactly what create the sense of living presence. When a person encounters such a machine in a real environment, the brain automatically begins to perceive it as a social participant rather than a device. And this is where things become especially interesting, because with the addition of artificial intelligence, the situation moves to an entirely new level. Robots gain the ability to understand conversational context, analyze human behavior, and adapt to it. They can remember preferences, adjust to communication styles, and even anticipate actions, making interaction more natural and less formal. If earlier a robot was perceived as a tool performing a single specific task, now it is increasingly seen as an assistant, and in some cases, even as a companion. This is especially noticeable in service industries and caregiving, where not only functionality, but also emotional interaction is important. In Japan, scenarios are already being tested in which robots assist elderly people at home. They can remind them to take medication, help with everyday tasks, and maintain basic communication. In the context of an aging society, this is becoming an extremely important direction, because the number of such people is growing while the number of caregivers is decreasing. But this is not the limit. Robots are beginning to appear in office environments, logistics, education, and even the entertainment industry. They are becoming a universal platform that can be adapted to different tasks, and the more use cases emerge, the faster the technology itself develops. At the same time, it is important to understand that we are only at the beginning of this journey. Despite impressive progress, such systems still have limitations. Movements are not yet always perfect, complex physical tasks remain difficult, and costs are still high. But these limitations are gradually decreasing with each new iteration of technology. That is why many experts talk about the so-called acceleration effect, when each new development makes the next one faster and more accessible. At some point, this may lead to a sharp increase in the spread of humanoid robots, when they begin to appear not in isolated cases, but on a mass scale. Against this backdrop, another important factor emerges: global competition. Japan is currently acting as a pioneer, but other countries are closely watching, especially China, which is actively investing in artificial intelligence and robotics. If the Japanese model proves effective, it will begin to be replicated and scaled, and then we may see global robotization, where humanoid machines become part of urban infrastructure in different countries. This creates an entirely new reality in which humans and machines interact on a constant basis. Robots will work alongside people, assist them, perform tasks, and gradually take up more space in everyday life. And this is where the most complex and interesting question begins: how this will change society. Because this is not only about technology, but also about human perception. When a machine that looks and behaves like a human is next to you, the boundaries begin to blur. Questions arise about trust, interaction, and even what should be considered real communication. If a robot is capable of holding a conversation, showing emotions, and helping in difficult situations, how does this affect the perception of human relationships? The labor market will also inevitably change. Some professions will gradually disappear because they can be automated, while new roles will emerge related to the development, maintenance, and management of such systems. Governments will have to adapt to these changes. New laws, rules, and standards will appear to regulate the use of robots in society. This is a complex process that is only just beginning. But despite all the questions and uncertainty, one thing can already be said with certainty: we are at a moment when technologies are moving from the experimental stage to mass adoption. Japan is now acting as a kind of testing ground for the future, where a model is being formed in which robots become part of everyday life. And if this experiment proves successful, it will inevitably spread to other countries. In such a scenario, in a few years we may find ourselves in a world where a robot in a cafe or store no longer causes surprise. It will become the norm, just as smartphones, online services, and automation have become the norm today. The most interesting part is that this process has already begun. It is not happening somewhere in theory, but right now, in real cities, among ordinary people. And that is why the current moment can be considered the beginning of a new era, an era in which robots stop being just machines and begin to become part of the human environment. And the further this technology develops, the more it will transform the world we are used to, gradually turning what once seemed like science fiction into everyday reality.